Hi, it's Melissa here. Today, I will discuss how advertisers can persuade customers using psychological techniques that involve roots of persuasion and components of attitude. Before we begin discussing this, let's talk about advertisements. On a daily basis, we encounter advertisements no matter where we go, especially now that everyone pretty much has a phone. Whether you're on social media, watching YouTube or TV, reading a magazine, or even while you're shopping at a mall, companies are always going to try to find ways to persuade you to buy their product or pay for their service. When we are shown an advertisement, we generally think it is good or bad. However, this only happens once we have been exposed to an advertisement at least once. This means our attitudes are only neutral before we know something, or in this case, an advertisement exists. Once we are exposed to an ad, it is then that our attitudes become positive or negative. Before we talk about the techniques advertisers use to persuade customers to invest in their product or service, let's talk about what attitudes are. They are evaluations that people have on people, object, events, or ideas. There are three components of attitudes. The first component is the affective component, where we have an attitude towards something that elicits an emotion. Another component is cognitive, which is all about our thoughts, beliefs, and opinions or judgments. Lastly, there's behavioral, which is all about the action you take after being exposed to something. In this case, we're talking about advertisements. Here's an example of the three components of attitude in play. Let's say you get a test back and have received a C on it. The affective component of your attitude towards this grade will either be negative or positive depending on your expectation. If you thought that you were going to get higher than a C, you'll feel sad. If you thought that you were going to do worse, you may not feel as sad. The cognitive component in this case could be the expectations or beliefs we just talked about, where you believe that you're going to get higher or lower than a C. Or perhaps this comes as no surprise. Lastly, your behavior will be influenced from this grade, where you may not study as much if you're expecting to do worse and are pretty happy with this grade, or you may end up studying a lot more for the next test to get a better grade. Research has said that people have more affectively, cognitively, or behaviorally based attitudes. Affective ads, or ads that cater to the emotion, will influence an affectively based attitude more than ads catering to the other two components. Cognitive based attitudes, however, are not as easily influenced by ads that cater towards this type of component, like we see with affectively based attitudes and ads. Not as much research has discussed behaviorally based attitudes and advertisements corresponding to this component, but advertisements that influence our behaviors typically try to change people's behavior to become more positive, whether it's to buy more green products or recycle, or even having your doctor try to change a habit for the greater good of your well-being. Let's take a moment to dive in deeper into these three components. The affective component of attitudes is all about how emotionally invested we are in the good or service advertised. This component is the most common component advertisers target to persuade customers. They will have ads that make customers typically feel happy and sometimes even sad. A study discussed by Norris and Coleman talked about how participants were found to be more likely to recall an advertisement if they were watching a TV program they found to be suspenseful and involving. This is why it's common to see advertisements on YouTube, Netflix, and TV, assuming you're watching captivating things like a dog driving a car. Another way advertisers target the affective component of customers' attitudes is by making customers feel guilty about something they think, feel, or do about an idea. Feeling guilty means you are feeling a combination of fear and joy. Ads that form a moderate amount of guilt in customers are most effective in persuading customers, but that is only if they are also able to provide the fact that their product or service will help with this guilty emotion and the issue causing the guilt. Otherwise, this will leave customers still feeling guilt and frustration, or even confused about how to solve the issue presented in the ad that made them feel guilty. The most common types of ads catering to cognitively based attitudes that we especially see nowadays are green products or eco-friendly products. Other advertisements that target our cognitive attitudes are typically going to be about utilitarian products like a washing machine or a coffee maker. With the cognitive component of attitude, people are paying attention to the content of the advertisement's message and weighing its value. This is why many eco-friendly products or products positioned to seem green are more likely to persuade customers to buy in order to save the world. Behavioral attitudes are attitudes that shape what action you will take, so inspirational advertisements can usually persuade customers' behavioral attitudes. Green products can also persuade customers because they want to take action in order to make the world a cleaner, healthier, and better place to live in. There are two ways we can be persuaded. There's the central root of persuasion, which is where people focus on the content of the message and the qualification of the speaker. So these are internal factors. And then there's the peripheral root of persuasion, which focuses on everything else besides the message. So it is more of external factors. This is START because this is the most common way people get persuaded. So things like branding, colors, tones of voice the speaker is using, special effects, technology are examples of the peripheral root. Three ways we get involved in central root of persuasion includes ability, which is time and ability to process the message, motivation, where you want to or are motivated to actually care enough to attend to the message or presenter, and then relevance. If the content of the message affects or will affect you, you will be more motivated to pay attention to the message. The drawing is an example where a dog owner sees an ad for dog food, which shows relevance since the owner has a dog. Today, in the age of technology where we are constantly having our phones glued to our faces everywhere we go, constantly being busy with work, and thus having less and less sleep, people can have low motivation and ability to pay attention to the strength and content of arguments made by advertisers. This actually increases the chances they will take mental shortcuts or heuristics where they don't need to put in as much effort to think about the message or advertisement. This is called the heuristic systematic model of persuasion. This increases the likelihood of being persuaded by ads as they don't have the time, ability, or motivation to pay attention to the ad's content. There are multiple components of the peripheral route that can persuade us. The first one is status. If the speaker has more authority than the audience is more likely to believe and listen to the speaker and the advertisement. The second one is an expert. You're more likely to trust someone who at least appears to be an expert and trust their arguments because you believe that they have more knowledge or some knowledge that you do not have. The third one is seeing that there are many arguments. This is a quantity over quality problem. Seeing a lot of bullets, for example, in an advertisement, even if they are not as informative or even if the arguments are not as strong, can make the product or service look valuable in the audience's eye. Also, things that are attention grabbing, like having a certain color combination to stand out among other products, having a certain type of music that creates a certain affect or emotion, and then having a certain type of smell or perfume, for example, like Hollister does. These are examples of other factors that could peripherally persuade a customer. With music, the lyrics may seem to have a lot of flowery language, but the meaning of the lyrics may have an inappropriate or bad message that the listener may not notice because the song could have a catchy beat. Overall, it's inevitable that we will have our attitudes changed or influenced by advertisements that are always present everywhere we turn to. It is a matter about whether you have the time. In other words, if you're able to attend to the content of the advertisement or actual message of the ad, and if you have the motivation to attend to the content. It is easier to avoid getting easily persuaded by advertisers who try to especially target you through the peripheral route of persuasion and target the affective component of your attitude. Now that you have been informed on the techniques advertisers use through these influential approaches to change customers' attitudes, you can walk away from ads that try to influence you and know that you can better shop in a smarter fashion. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope that this helps you to shop smarter.